In today's video, we're going to demonstrate using F5 Access Policy Manager and Okta to perform password-based single sign-on into on-premise applications. In our example today, we have a web app that uses forms-based authentication. The user logs in with their username and password, and they are guaranteed access to the website. Here we see that we're user 1. Now, ideally, we'd like to integrate with Okta so that we can use an identity store. So in this example, we'll be authenticating into Okta. And then once we're authenticated, we're single sign into the on-premise F5 Access Policy Manager, and we're logged into the web app as user 1. So let's take a look at what the configuration would look like both in Okta and on the F5 Access Policy Manager. Now we're going to configure our Okta applications. The first application we're going to create is a SAML 2.0 app. Now we're going to call this one APM SSO test. This is the application that the user will see in their Okta portal. So we'll click next now. Now we're going to configure the SAML settings. The single sign-on URL is provided by the F5. This is going to be the FQDN of the virtual server, followed by /SAML, /SP, /profile, /post, /ACS. The audience URI is going to be the entity ID of the service provider. Everything else can be left as default, so we'll scroll to the bottom and choose Next. Now Okta is going to ask us why we didn't use a pre-existing application. You just simply say, I am an Okta customer, and this is an internal app, and click Finish. Now we're going to configure Okta to provide the credentials to F5. We're going to choose a template app. Now we're going to change the name to anything you like. The user will never see this, so this is just primarily a backend application. The URL needs to be the same entity ID that we used previously, except now we're going to have /my.policy as the path. This allows Okta to pass the username and password to Access Policy Manager so it can consume it. Username parameters, username, passwords, password. We do want to hide this, so please check the following two checkboxes to remove it from the portal and from the mobile app, and then uncheck the automatic login. Now, we want this to use a administrator set username, but the same password that the user logs into Okta with. We'll select one of our test users. Now Okta can allow you to remove the realm. In our demo, we'll keep the realm in there and we'll click Done. Now we'll configure the Access Policy Manager. So click Create. We'll call this one Okta SSO. Now for the profile type, we'll select All. And we're going to scroll down and set our default language for English. Click Finished. Now that we have our profile created, we can create our SAML configurations. So let's start with the external IDP connector. So we'll click Create, but you notice there's a couple of options here. We're interested in the From metadata. So switch back over to your Okta administrative portal and let's access that APM SSO test app again. Now the tab we're interested in is the single sign-on tab up at the top. And about halfway down the page, you'll see Identity Provider Metadata. And this will download an XML file we can import into the F5. So browse for that file that you downloaded. And the identity provider name can be anything that you like. I like to use the IDP name - the application. When that's done, we'll click OK. Now we need to create our SP service. So again, we'll click the Create button. And the name can be anything that you like. We'll call this one SSO. The entity ID needs to be the FQDN of the SP that F5 is providing. The rest of the options can be left default. And we will click OK at the bottom. Now we need to bind the IDP connectors. So we'll click Add New Row. On the drop-down, you'll see the IDP we just created, and you can click Update and OK. And now that that is set, we can customize the visual policy editor for the access profile. So click the plus button. and we can type SAML, and it will bring up the SAML auth. Click Add Item. Now from the AAA server, we'll choose the SP we created earlier and click Save. We'll need to change our successful ending to Allow and click Save. And now we can add in our external authentication page. Now this is the page that will consume the credentials from Okta. Now this URI we need to obtain from the Okta portal. So log back in and access the APM SSO. This is the hidden application. And on the General tab towards the bottom, you're going to see the embedded link. Go ahead and copy that and switch back over to the F5 Visual Policy Editor. And we will paste this in as our external login server URI, and then click Save. And once that's done, we'll provide our SSO credential mapping. This way F5 can perform single sign-on into the backend apps. And we'll apply our access profile. Now that we have our access profile created, we'll need to assign that to our virtual servers. So I'm going to create a new virtual server here. We'll call it SSO. I'll give it an IP address. Granted, this is good in my environment only, so you need to come up with your own unique IP address. We need to assign an HTTP profile, and we need to also give it an SSL profile. I have a wildcard certificate for my domain. In my scenario, I need to provide source address translation, and I will assign the access profile that I created earlier. Once all of this is done, I can set the default server pool that the app will use and click Finish. Now that that's finished, we can configure SSO on Access Policy Manager. Now I'm not going to walk you through these steps. There's plenty of information on Dev Central, but I'll give you a highlight of what I'm using. It's a Forms client-initiated SSO profile. The form itself is under the name Secure Login, and a few things we'll take a look at. The parameters are going to be username and password based upon SSO. More importantly, the form detection is based upon that URI. So that's how the SSO profile knows that it needs to submit the username and password to the backend application. Everything else is default. Now, once we've configured this, we'll go back into our access profile under the SSO tab, and SSO configuration is where we'll assign this, and click Update. After this, you should have a fully functioning web app that the user signs into Okta and are seamlessly logged into the on-premise application using username and password. I hope you've enjoyed this demo of F5 Access Policy Manager's integration with Okta for on-premise SSO. For more information, check out devcentral.f5.com and okta.com.